philosophy, and I work on post-human aesthetics. That's my primary area. Well, Jaime del Val's works cover a lot of ideas and a lot of territory. I'm going to focus only on some of them, if I can. Well, I don't have pictures to show, but I will talk. Well, I actually have one more slide, and just I brought Jaime del Val together with Dionysius. So, all right. So, okay, let me start. I experienced only one metaformance of Jaime del Val. That was in Lesbos, 2011. And then I wrote a review of his Metaformance for our electronic journal, Dionysian. And then we also had an interview with him and with Stefan. That's also published in Dionysian. If you like to read, you can actually go into the archives. September, that should be fall 2011. All right, so my main topic is to talk about the spectator divide. Jaime also referred to that. It is that split or that divide that goes back to ancient Greece that Nietzsche diagnosed in the 19th century in his book The Birth of Tragedy. It is one of the main problems of our age. If we agree with Nietzsche's diagnostics, of course, it is also among post-Marxists like Debord. Debord also talks about that in his own way. In the 20th century, a lot of artists dealt with that. Clearly, Jaime del Val's project is unique, but he's also operating within that post-Nietzschean, post-dualistic framework. All right, well, I'm going to focus on, out of all the things, like there's the embodiment, there's all technology, but I'm going to focus on the Dionysian aesthetics, relationalism, and also amorphogenesis and recreational effects in Jaime del Val's works. The first one, Dionysian aesthetics. Nietzsche's announcement in The Birth of Tragedy that excess revealed itself as truth is in section 4, which pretty much set the stage for many artists to come. It is pretty much an understanding of Dionysian. What it is, the Dionysian is excess of forces, it is the unity of all forces. In terms of our spectacular relations, it is the unity of spectacle and spectators, where actually that split melts. According to Nietzsche, there was no divide before. Theater emerged out of the cult of Dionysus, and pretty much what you had was a singing and dancing group of members of the cult of Dionysus. And theater emerged out of that cult. This is of course a speculation, but that speculation is confirmed by many 20th century scholars. I guess they're pretty much split. At least half of scholars on ancient Greece do confirm Nietzsche's finding that theater emerged out of the cult of Dionysus. So the bottom line is that there is no divide that between grand spectacle that dictates or overpasses spectators. And in the way that I read Jaime del Val's works and his metaformances, is that that's an attempt also to overcome that split between an active spectacle and a passive audience. We are all part of the creative process. This is a quotation from our interview, which you can read in our electronic journal. Quotation: metahumanism, and we are talking about metahumanism here. Metahumanism could also be said to propose a radically Dionysian aesthetics, since it focuses on the amorphous as both political and aesthetic paradigm that does not require form, although it may operate on the boundaries of form to redefine it. In fact, maybe I think if you want to follow my reading over here, quotation, I should have it right here. That's from Jaime del Val. So pretty much there are no fixed forms according to Nietzsche. The way he understands also the Dionysian, the form would fall under the Apollonian. If you read Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, you would know what these terms are. Right here, actually, I skipped that. So, and the Dionysian actually refers to the fluidity of forms. There's nothing eternal. Forms, no rigid form, no static forms, but always constantly changing forms. And in a way, Metabody is a Dionysian reconstruction in its diffuse nature. So there are no fixed forms. He did refer to apeiron in the Anaximander's fragments, that apeiron somehow, maybe also it refers to the Dionysian in maybe thought, in philosophy, because there's no limit. Apeiron is limitless, infinite. Somehow there may be a parallel between the two. Now, I'll move on. The other thing, one more thing about the Dionysian, it also relates to embodiment, a term that Jaime del Val uses. I think Kevin also used the term. Embodiment appears, I don't think the term appears in Nietzsche, but it is present implicitly in the idea of Dionysian, because we are all bodies are united in the Dionysian. So in a way, that's one meaning of the embodiment. Heidegger also talks about it, but in different terms. It's the Mit-Dasein. We are always with other beings. We are always connected, so there's really no subject-object dualism according to Heidegger. And then it's also in Merleau-Ponty. For Merleau-Ponty, before even we are linguistic, we are already integrated into other bodies. Babies are already aware of other bodies, so they're already embodied. So they all talk about embodiment in different ways. In Nietzsche, it's pretty much the Dionysian. And Nietzsche, the Dionysian is very much, especially in the Birth of Tragedy, is an aesthetic concept. There is not the only use of the term Dionysian in post-Nietzschean literature. For instance, Bataille is highly sexualized, it's orgiastic. In Nietzsche, the late writings, he also refers to Dionysian in orgiastic sense, in the twilight of the idols. So, my second area is relationalism. Well, perpetually revolving or evolving forces that are at work in the universe. We can say just a couple of things, that there's nothing pluralistic. There's some typos, excuse the typos here. I did not capitalize that on purpose. So nothing is unitarian, so we're all multiplistic. That's the first point. And nothing is static or permanent. That's the second. And the final point is that all beings are in relation with other beings. So we are almost always connected to one another. And in a way, Jaime uses the term, understands relationalism as an a priori condition of movement. So we are always connected, and this relationalism is, in a way, a condition of our movement. It's kind of interesting. Last night I was in a book reading, book reception, a book on the movement and dance, written by a dancer and a thinker. Kind of very similar. Jaime is a thinker and a performer, metaformer, sorry, generic term, performance artist. Similarly, is a Nietzschean dancer. Her name is, if you like to read her work, Chimera Lamotte. She has a book on Nietzsche's dancers. In that book, she explores Nietzsche's influence on modern dance, starting with Isadora Duncan. And in fact, it's kind of interesting that I'm doing this two events in a row, and last night I was there. Her book is wonderful. She talks about, it's really, at the bottom, the ideas are very similar, but she's approaching it from dance. And she also talks a lot about how restrictive our modern life is, how confining it is in terms of our movement. And Jaime talks about the hegemonic discourses and the panopticon, so Francesco mentioned that, systems of control, manipulation, the effects of capitalism. I wouldn't just only say capitalism, but the whole society, pretty much. It's not the economic system that is restrictive and repressive of the entire society. I mean, all prisons that we have today in the United States, 2.25 million inmates in our system. today. just that alone. I mean, there are lots of other problems, but that alone shows you how repressive, how restricted we are in the whole disciplinarian society. For that, we need to read Foucault, Panopticon. So, again, quoting from Jaime on relationalism, the metahumanism draws on post-humanism, which we can read together, and its critique of the humanistic tradition by putting emphasis on the relational aspect of reality. Bottom line is the humanistic tradition, that's the Cartesianism in philosophy that operates with the subject-object dualism, that is parallel to humanism, right? So now we actually, post-humanism is a critic of that humanistic, that dualistic tradition. It can be described as a radical relationalism. Is it not merely describes the existing relations between entities, but by focusing a priori on the relationality. Understood as movement, proposes that whatever we see as the street is an effect of contingent relations, that by transforming the relations, seemingly the street may also be transformed. I mean, that's not what I remember what he said a couple of years ago. You may not even understand what he had said a long time ago. But anyway, so it applies to human social spheres of relationality as well as to the larger and smaller spheres of dimensions. So it doesn't matter the micro or the macro levels, they're all relational. So wherever you go in the universe. So his works present new critical paradigms and modalities of becoming by recreating new effects that operate not through representation and language, but through recreational movements. So yeah, in fact, if you remember from his presentation earlier, he said many of our communications are non-verbal, so they're not linguistic. There are a lot of areas of non-verbal communication. So we are not just linguistic beings, clearly we do speak. Right now I'm speaking, but we also have a lot of non-linguistic, non-verbal communications. One area that I did not mention is sports. That's also non-verbal. I mean, it's huge. Many people, millions of people do play sports today. Watch passively what a lot of people play. So they are actually engaging in a non-verbal activity. I also do philosophy of sport, by the way. I'm very much, my bigger area is bodily regimes. So including post-humanism, I also work on sports, philosophy of sport. So let's move on to the last one, amorphogenesis. The way I understand it. I think I may explain it well. Both Francesco and Kevin also talked about that. So it is through amorphous, missing that amorphous becomings that Jaime del Val proposes to overcome rigid structure of the old order, whether these are in the form of religion, metaphysics, social norms, or ideology of identity. Clearly, today we still suffer from all of them, meaning a big portion of humanity is still under the captivity or hegemony of these things that I'm mentioning here. Even in liberal societies, clearly, we have the Panopticon here. If you accept Foucault's thesis or Debord's thesis, society of spectator. According to Jaime, we must resist these hegemonic forms and create new forms without replicating, like that, the new types of effects. It's not clear, it's not an easy task, and already I'm mentioning 3 things here that he covers, but then there's technology, there's embodiment, there are many other things, so it's a very huge spectrum. And he does this in the domain of art and performance. And just 2 things on amorphogenesis. First, Jaime del Val dissects the human body, showing how the body itself is multiplistic and how its multiple forces and effects can be gathered in new forms. The whole thing about the body goes back to Spinoza, right? Spinoza, then Nietzsche, and I guess 19th century, including Nietzsche, and the 20th century. So now the body is being retrieved without falling into any dualistic metaphysics. So in a way, we are kind of fortunate to have gone through the dualistic phase since Greeks and Plato. And so when Jaime talks about the body or other performance artists and thinkers, I don't think they're falling into another hegemony of the body. I think they understand that they're approaching it from a holistic standpoint, meaning they're not going to prioritize the body or the mind, but rather look at integral human being. And that's how I read it. I don't just read it as simply the body, but rather this holistic approach that includes multiplicity of forces that we are, including our thinking selves. And he does this through innovative technologies, which you've seen, and hopefully you'll see more this weekend. Second thing about morphogenesis is Jaime del Val integrates his spectators into his artwork as he integrates new simulacra. The theory of simulacrum was developed by Pierre Klossowski. He will be, and in one of my papers on post-human aesthetics, I did incorporate his ideas, and I'm hoping that Klossowski will be integrated more into post-human discourse. In fact, Foucault borrows a lot from Klossowski. So basically, the theory of simulacrum replaces. It's an post-human theory as opposed to theory of representation that goes back to all the Greeks, Plato and Aristotle. So in this way, spectators are not seen as passive beings isolated from the creative process, but they rather become part of that process. The paradigm is no longer formed as opposite copy. That's how the representation model works, but rather one simulacrum among others. And the simulacra can be of different kinds. Even text could be a simulacrum, or a human being. Multiple types of simulacra, or one effect among many other effects. Invoking Nietzsche, Foucault, and many other thinkers in relation to life and life forces, Jaime del Val says, the amorphous becomings proposed by metahumanism are an important shift, which states that representation and language are inescapable only insofar as we assume them. They are but a very contingent paradigm. We move all the time outside of it. It is not a condition for livable life, meaning now we are in the post-representational, post-linguistic paradigms. Subjecting life to patterns and forms is itself a specific technology of control. That's the technology of the disciplinary society that Foucault talks about in his book, Discipline and Punished, but not a necessary condition of life, obviously. The disciplinary society was created, invented. It's not eternal, therefore it's not a necessary condition of life. In fact, it is not necessary at all. We may articulate other kinds of ecologies of relations that rely on immanence more than on exteriority, and amorphous becomings more than an identity and form. End of quotation. So, in closing, Jaime's works open up new vistas, new arenas for thought, new venues for creative work. In his metaformative action, he brings different artistic expressions together through a technological medium, almost like a total artwork. I hope he forgives me for using this Wagnerian phrase, but similar, maybe I could say not the same. On the one hand, his work challenges many accepted notions about art and human body. On the other hand, he shows how technology and its hegemonic effects can be resisted and combated in performance, as technology in advanced form is integrated into the creative process in a Dionysian artistic community. Thank you very much. I hope I did it.